welcome to Things Getting Strange, an X-Files Rewatch podcast. I'm Nick.
And I'm Kim.
And I think the only news we've got is more FileFest, I seem to understand.
Yeah, we've been talking about FileFest for the last few weeks now. In case you haven't listened to any of our previous episodes, FileFest is taking place at the Mall of America in Bloomington, Minnesota. It's from the 8th to the 10th of September, and there are tickets still available on their website as far as I'm aware. They have announced 4 new guests this week. I'm not going to go through the full list again. If you listened to last week's episode, we did reel them off because there's quite a lot of them now and quite a lot of good high-profile guests there. But the new ones that they've announced in the last week are Sheila Larkin and Rebecca Tulin. That's Margaret Scully and Tina Mulder, their parents respectively. There are also a couple of other really interesting ones. There's Jerry Hardin, that's Deep Throat, and also Mr. X, Stephen Williams, will be making an appearance as well.
Cool. We just need the third of Mulder's contacts and they'll have the full set.
Marita.
Yeah, let's get them all together up on stage for a photo of Mulder's occasionally useful contacts.
Well, they have said that there's a few more guests to be announced, so maybe you'll get your wish, Nick.
So I suppose without any other noteworthy news at the moment, we should probably get to Død Kalm.
Yeah, our first episode today.
Død Kalm, directed by Rob Bowman. Teleplay by Howard Gordon and Alex Ganza. First one the two of them have written in a while. First broadcast on the 10th of March 1995. The most significant guest out of the episode is John Savage, who played Henry Trondheim, who was in Star Trek Voyager and Twin Peaks Revival.
Oh, okay.
Okay, so synopsis of Død Kalm. In the Norwegian Sea, an American destroyer, the USS Ardent, is evacuated due to unspecified events. Half the crew abandon the ship on lifeboats against the captain's orders. 18 hours later, a Canadian fishing vessel picks them up, but discovers all of them have aged rapidly. Mulder and Scully visit the one surviving member of the crew, Lieutenant Harper, who has been quarantined at Bethesda Naval Hospital. Scully is able to gain access to him and finds that despite being in his 20s, he's aged to the point of being unrecognizable. Mulder later explains that the ship vanished in the 65th parallel, a known location of ship disappearances. Mulder believes it is a wrinkle in time and that the Arden was the subject of government experimentation, not unlike the Philadelphia experiment in World War II. In Norway, Mulder and Scully hire Henry Trondheim, who is able and willing to take them to Ardent's last known location. They discover the ship after some interference with the radar, but crash into it. Upon boarding the ship, they find the ship is in advanced stages of corrosion, even though the ship was launched in 1991. Below decks, they find mummified remains of the several crew members, and the commanding officer of the Ardent, who claims time got lost after the ship encountered a glowing light in the ocean. Trondheim's boat is subsequently stolen by an unknown entity, and his first mate is murdered shortly afterwards. Trondheim is then attacked by a Norwegian pirate whaler named Olafsson, who has not aged despite being on the ship for the past 2 days. Over time, Mulder, Scully and Trondheim begin to age unnaturally, but Olafsson remains youthful. Scully develops a theory that the Ardent is sailing near a metallic object under the ocean and it has caused free radicals to rapidly oxidize their bodies and age them. Mulder notices that the sewage pipe is the only pipe in the ship not corroded by rust, and they realize that something from the ocean has contaminated all the potable water on board. Olafsson and his men remained unaffected due to their consumption of recycled water from the sewage system. Desperate to survive, Trondheim kills Olafsson after he reveals the secret and sets out to keep the water for himself. Scully learns from blood tests that the contaminated water causes rapid oxidative damage and dramatically increases sodium chloride in the body. She attempts to ration the remaining drinkable water amongst the 3 survivors, but Trondheim attempts to hoard what little remains. He seals himself in the sewage hold and forces her to scrape together whatever moisture can be found to keep Mulder alive, who is suffering far more than she is. The ship's outer hull eventually corrodes away and floods the hold, drowning Trondheim. The agents lose consciousness over time, but fortunately the Navy is able to rescue them before they succumb to death. Scully comes to in hospital and is told that all her observational notes made during the time on the ship helped her reverse the aging process and save Mulder from near certain death. Scully wishes to return to the Ardent for more research, but is informed the ship sank shortly after their rescue due to the flooding. I know you hate this episode.
Oh, yeah, I do. I seem to be in the minority, though. At the time that it was released, it should be noted that this episode did review really well.
I don't really understand why, because it's Ice version 5?
Yeah, it's another, you call them bottle episodes.
I do, but I mean, in terms of the X-Files, this is really designed for Ice again. Because we've had Darkness Falls and we had Firewalker, and now we've got... So it's Ice version 4, but still, it's exact same setup as Ice, but with less stakes and less meaningful conflict.
I imagine your stakes here is that the effects are actually affecting Mulder and Scully rather rapidly, and they're in quite an isolated place in the middle of the sea.
Oh yeah, but I think it's also notable that Howard Gordon has penned 2 of these episodes in close succession. Because Ice was Morgan and Wong, and Darkness Falls was Chris Carter, and then Howard Gordon just gives us Firewalker and Død Kalm in the same season.
Yeah, true.
I don't think he's aware of what it was, and it turns out the episode was written to take advantage of the naval destroyer they were using for Colony and Endgame. So it's not the best justification for writing an episode on a ship.
Presumably this is the set of the submarine, then?
Yeah, this is what they use for that part.
Well, I suppose if you've got a naval destroyer to hand, you might as well get your use out of it.
Yeah, but I think give it to one of the other writers. Or just... I think the other frustrating part of it is, unlike Ice, Darkness Falls, and Firewalker, we get even less of an idea of what's causing it. Because Mulder suggests time warp, which is baloney. Scully says giant battery in the ocean, which is not true. And we get something contaminated the water on the ship.
You do get the story that the Norwegian people tell at the start.
Yeah.
Towards the start in the bar where they mention what could be a meteor hitting the ocean, which again is like ice.
And yeah. And something glowing onto the water, but we've got no idea if it's alien parasites or it's just there's something in the water that's doing this to you. It's unsatisfying is what I'm getting at.
Yeah, I guess it's one of those X-Files mysteries where there's no way we can possibly know this.
No, and it's also slow moving, and so appreciate that there's a stake there, but it's also, I don't know, it's just hard. It's hard to get behind, I feel.
It seems to take its inspiration, well, quite obviously from the Philadelphia experiment, as it name drops it in the episode, which is one of these kind of semi-urban legend seafaring things about an attempt to make a military vessel invisible that caused it to teleport and other weird things to happen.
Yeah.
And you've also got kind of the feel of another seafaring urban legend, the Iran Medan, as well. The idea of finding the derelict and going aboard and finding all these people who have died with no obvious cause, and then the ship sinking before there can be a full investigation of it, which you get in this episode too.
Yeah. It's just, I think there's other instances of those stories being done, and they work a lot better. I think it's the whole, this one's too mundane.
I'm going to cite, if I'm mentioning the Iran Medan as well, something like Man of Medan.
Yeah.
Man of Medan is one of the Dark Pictures anthology, a series of kind of choose-your-own-adventure-ish horror video games. One of the early entries was inspired by the legend of the Iran Medan. Game, as I say, is called Man of Medan, which is the direct translation of that name. But that kind of has this idea of the creepy derelict ghost ship and scary things happening, and there's a possible explanation for what's causing this at the end that seems viable. Which makes it satisfying as well.
Yeah, as this is, I think Scully actually does say it in one of her journal entries, is, we experienced none of the weird phenomena that the crew reported.
Yeah.
Thanks, Scully, that's just taken most of the interest out of the episode.
None of the weird phenomenon except the kind of rapid aging.
Yeah, and that's just makeup, unfortunately, in this.
I don't think it looks terribly good either, particularly on Mulder.
I think it was notable in the reviews that Mulder comes off looking really bad. Scully's is actually quite effective.
I thought it's quite effective in the opening, when you see that kind of boatload of the sailors and it's not in very good light, it's more convincing then.
Yeah, although my comment at the time was, why did we put makeup on the younger cast members and not just get appropriately aged people in? Because you've seen these people for less than 10 seconds at the start of the episode. You've no idea who they are later.
I suppose you could just put them in the same uniforms.
Exactly. You'd have the same effect with less makeup budget.
True.
The other thing that got me about watching this episode again is, I think it's the first time one part of the episode has ever made sense to me.
Okay.
It's when Olafsson dies. Because there's a very gloomy shot of Olafsson kind of beaten to death against a wall while Trondheim is missing with the sewage system. And I think every other time I've watched the episode, it's basically, you can sort of see him there, and I've never gone, wait, who? And then it's cut across to Trondheim, couldn't figure out what that was. I was going, so where did Olafsson go? Because I just kept thinking him walking up the plot.
Yeah, he's kind of not mentioned again.
And they let it go. And I think that's the other frustrating part of the episode. It's one of these, they don't follow the thread. Because Trondheim has let him go.
Yeah.
Because he's saying, oh, he slipped the bonds. You're not supposed to be bad. It's like, no, the ropes have been cut. And they make no effort to find him. Okay, so, yes, I realise he's dead, but only one of you knows that. And who stole the ship is really unclear.
Oh, at the very start when the ship kind of pulls away.
And that's even more confusing because it's the whole, they find the mummified bodies. The first mate runs out of the room. The ship pulls away, so we think he's on there. Then we find the first mate murdered.
I guess you got to assume he has other crew.
Yeah, it must have been more of Olafsson's lot. Yeah.
Oh, Olafsson's. No, I was thinking there might be more crew on the boat to begin with.
No, I got the impression it was just the two of them.
Oh, okay. Yeah, then it's got to be some survivors. You know that Olafsson had a couple of friends because they find this sort of nest.
Yeah. It's a weird jumbled episode, and I make fun of the bar, and it turns out on the production notes they needed to find a place they could dress as a Norwegian bar, and then turn it into a hospital. And apparently the location manager was going, "You want us to do what?"
You made fun of the fact that it's just like a wall with a flag on it.
Yeah, it's just got a Norwegian flag plastered right there. It's like, look, yeah, we're definitely in Norway. No, not down the road from David Duchovny's apartment or anything.
I read somewhere that the kind of language they use is a bit gibberish in this episode as well, because pure Norwegian didn't sound convincing enough. So it's kind of Norwegian with bits of Swedish thrown in there and stuff like that.
And I know we'll get onto it much later for obvious reasons. It's one of these things where you start to ask about the X-Files travel budget. Because they've ping-ponged across the country as it is. They've, gone down to Florida, they've gone...
Further afield is usually on Mulder's own dime, though, like when he went to wherever Arecibo is.
Puerto Rico.
Yeah.
However, this time, they've gone to Norway as part of their official investigation. Which is a long old flight when they didn't get any clearance from Skinner or any authorization to go and do this.
I get the impression Mulder's a bit like, we'll do this now and clear it later.
Yeah. And it's one of these the central premise of a Bermuda Triangle-esque area that's notorious for these ship disappearances is kind of cool. I think the problem is whenever you get down to one of these stories in fiction, whatever's doing it always falls apart when you actually get it revealed. Because it doesn't matter if it's supernatural, time travel, aliens, what have you, the revelation of what is causing things to disappear always falls flat. Much like it does here, because apparently it seems to be the water on board the ship will get contaminated, it'll just rust and sink itself. And you're going, yay, really? But then there's weirdness as well, given that the radar sonar, whatever they were using to track the ship when they were going there the first time, because it meant to take them 10 hours to get there and it takes them 12. And this Collins leads into Mulder's time warp theory. And then the ship keeps appearing and disappearing on the screen. And so is that indicating something supernatural?
I thought that was more of an indication of Scully's theory that this is the meteorite, it's magnetism that's affecting it.
But then it turns out that's nothing to do with anything.
Well, it could still be the meteorite or something like that.
It could be low down.
Don't discredit, because I kind of thought that might be what's causing... We don't know the nature of the substance because they have no way of analysing it, whatever it is that's kind of catalysing on the ship. That also could be something to do with this meteorite, much like these worms that we hypothesised came off the meteorite in ice.
And I'm wondering if that's why they didn't focus on it too much, because someone said, it sounds a lot like ice.
But also they'd have no way of testing it.
No.
Because they're very isolated aboard a ship and they've only got what they've got in their pockets.
It's the weird contrast, isn't it, between Ice, Darkness Falls, and Firewalker, and this one is the cast is so narrow. Because there's basically this is a 3-person episode for the majority of it.
With a bit of Olafsson.
Yeah, and then until he dies, and it's just the 3 of them, and it's like all the other ones. Because I think for the thing like Paranoia, which is obviously what this is another iteration of, you need a small but larger cast to have the elements of doubt start to creep into things.
It's not quite the thing like Paranoia, though, because we don't have an entity in this episode. It's more like kind of cabin fever that they get.
Yeah.
It's the going slightly mad when you're in this situation where there is something that is slowly killing you off and you've got to find a way to stave it off or prevent it.
Yeah. And I think just an entity would have made it better. So some malevolent force, these would have given you more entertaining episodes.
You want it to be more like Ice.
If you're going to rip off Ice, I think you just go the whole hog, really. The other thing I think as well is the episode is kind of written like it's the last one of the X-Files. This is Mulder's quest for the truth gone too far. He's put himself into an unwinnable situation and he's just going to die.
That does lead to some of the nicest moments. The best bits in the episode are the bits where just Mulder and Scully interact with each other. There are some quite personal scenes in this one.
Oh, yeah. And it's all very nice, but it's the whole... You have all the drawn-out goodbyes and everything and the swimming coming to unconsciousness. And then the Navy show up. It's really jarring, the whole... It's not like they managed to get one signal out or something before they sort of got trapped, is it?
I feel it's more a writing problem in the effect of we've written ourselves into a corner and there is no way to end this.
Yes, without killing them. So basically someone has to swoop in, Deus Ex Machina, and carry them out again.
We'll give away it's done better and it's going into the extended media again. Of course, this one doesn't have a kind of novel adaptation, but there is a short story. I think it's the last short story in the first collected anthology of short stories in this, but it features a cave where there's something in the water that petrifies people, like Medusa turned to stone job. And Mulder and Scully both get infected towards the end of it and Mulder realizes just in the nick of time that only fresh water can purify them and wash this out of their system, much the same. So it ends with a massive frantic chase to get to a place with like a big water butt so they can just douse themselves in it as they are slowly petrifying. So you've got a more dramatic ending where there is a way that they can save themselves if they're very, very fast.
Yeah. I think I'd totally go for that one.
Yeah. It's... Unfortunately, the nature of this episode is you're not in a cave where we can frantically do this. You're in the middle of the ocean and there is very limited availability for things that can pull you out.
Yeah, and that's why the ending feels jarring. I mean, again, I think one of the fundamental flaws of the episode is it was written to take advantage of the thing they'd rented. It didn't come from an organic, I have an idea for an X-Files script. It's, what could we possibly set on a boat?
A military vessel in particular.
A military vessel in particular, that we can just make use of while we've got hold of it, because it'll be much before we have to hand it back again. And I'm pretty sure that's not the best genesis of a good idea.
No, true.
I did find it entertaining as well, though, near the start of the episode, when Mulder is talking about the 65th parallel to Scully and mentioned the Philadelphia experiment. And it's hard not to sort of get into Scully's mindset of, Mulder, what are you talking about? This is more gibberish than normal today.
If you read anything about the Philadelphia experiment, it is just bizarre as well, and it's a weird thing for Mulder to get on board with.
Well, especially as there's basically no evidence for it. I mean, and I think...
Other than a couple of people say so.
Yeah, and I think most accounts of it actually are hopelessly entangled with the film version, which just muddies the water further.
The film version is actually about time travel.
Exactly. I mean, I think it came up oddly about the Mary Celeste recently. So I've watched some video game reviews, and there's a guy called Mandalore Gaming who did a video about Limbo of the Lost. This is a bit of a tangent, but bear with me.
Okay.
Limbo of the Lost is an infamous PC game that came out in the early 2000s. The controversial thing about it was all the backgrounds were stolen. As in, literally, screenshots from other games.
Okay.
So you had screenshots from Elder Scrolls Oblivion and Thief Deadly Shadows and just loads of other things, and like these flame gifts were stolen, and basically it was an enormous thing of plagiarism, and it was pulled from shelves. Limbo of the Lost, though, if you actually play it, is about the captain of the Mary Celeste. Limbo of the Lost is the first book written about the Mary Celeste back in the 60s, and it's where a lot of the modern sort of interest in the Mary Celeste came from. But all this kind of goes back to when the Mary Celeste thing happened. The actual historical events at the time became hopelessly confused because Arthur Conan Doyle wrote a short story about what he thought happened to the Mary Celeste. And basically everything got convoluted together.
I
see. It's very hard for people to straighten out what was actually historically happening and all the various other media surrounding it. And so basically, you probably know, many years ago, they actually figured out the most plausible sequence of events for the Mary Celeste and what happened to it, which is a butane explosion on board. Everyone panicked because fires at seas are bad, went to the lifeboats, and basically got stranded.
Yeah.
So, anyway, the whole point is, I get the impression that's what happened to with the Philadelphia experiment, is everyone's conflating the film with the actual project that was not actually going to work, to be honest.
The project on a basic level was just to make ships invisible to radar.
Yeah, not invisible to real life.
That's as far as you get in realism in this project. You can probably buy that a project like this would be beneficial to the US government and therefore would exist. But anything that follows that in what you think you know about the Philadelphia experiment is where it becomes urban legend.
Yeah, and there's obviously fiction's been inspired by it. Like Portal 2 has a thing about the Borealis, which is basically suffered a Philadelphia experiment kind of style accident.
Mm.
But yeah, it's really odd to hear Mulder sort of invoke the Philadelphia experiment and just apparently not be and say, oh yeah, things about time travel. In this case, are you sure about this, Mulder?
Then bizarrely set it in the Norwegian Sea and not in the Bermuda Triangle, which would be a more obvious setting for it.
It's not in the production notes, but you got to wonder if that's one of the rules they laid down early. Because you know there's the thing of you can't see aliens in season 1.
Yeah.
Although you can't see aliens in alien form in season 1 because the Kindred were around. Did someone say, "Oh, can we do a Bermuda Triangle episode?" And they said, "Absolutely not." But yeah, I've got to wonder if there's some mandate of not doing the Bermuda Triangle because it's, I don't know, you can't. It's a really strange one to do. And as an aside, if anyone's actually curious, if you dig into the Bermuda Triangle whatsoever, the entire justification of it falls apart quite spectacularly, doesn't it?
I think it's any kind of area of the ocean of a similar size has the same number of disappearances in it. There's nothing unusual about that area.
Absolutely not.
Well, when I was a teenager, my family went on a Caribbean cruise that went straight through the Bermuda Triangle. And you've got to go on the basis that isn't a one-off. This cruise route goes through there all the time, and you've not got whole ships of people disappearing on there.
I think it's possibly part of why people like supernatural stories so much. Because the real world doesn't match up to it, because any one of these, anything you get to read 14 times about anything truly weird or anything, it's if they dig down into it, basically the evidence for it starts slipping away very fast. And then you get the whole, why did it happen in this one sequence of events and to this one particular person, and cannot be replicated and will not happen to literally anyone else. In the end, when you get the explanations, they're always unsatisfying and really mundane, and there wasn't really a story there in the first place, isn't it?
You want to believe, though, that's the entire purpose of Mulder's ethos is it's kind of ignoring the Occam's razor answer and thinking, yeah, but what if that did happen? What if that is the truth?
Yeah, and I think that's the problem with this episode is that you've given us an implausible, improbable, non-mundane explanation, and it's boring.
Yeah.
It's really, really dull.
When you've gone down to the whole, it might be caused by a meteorite or whatever, but the effect is medical.
Yeah. I mean, I'd accept Scully's magnet thing. That's fine as a weird science explanation for what might be happening. And then they just dismiss it.
It still might be what's happening. They don't totally dismiss that one.
They don't totally dismiss it, but they know it's something in the water itself. The meteorite might have caused it, but it's not the magnet.
Yeah, but Scully's idea was that the meteorite is what's catalyzing it, which could still be true. Because when they take them away from that area, they can cure them.
True. It's very odd then that they sort of just say, oh, the ship sank and that's the end of it. But you know an approximate location. Can you not send rafts with instruments into this area?
There's definitely something dangerous in that area that you need to either get rid of or nobody can sail there.
Yeah, just take water samples in this area, send it an automated thing in, and then kind of plot the area it exists in.
I presume on the base, though, if you need... Essentially, we're treating this meteorite, because it's in salt water, as being an electromagnet, I presume. So, therefore, even if you took samples, it wouldn't show anything. You need the magnet there.
It's possible. Unless Mulder is right and it is something just completely waterborne that's doing it.
Like a parasite, like ice.
Yeah, I'm afraid we can't go away from this, can we? We're going to keep circling back to this was a fundamentally bad episode to do.
I'm still going to go with it's a combination of this stuff that Scully refers to as heavy salt and a giant, big, supernatural electromagnet under the water that's just speeding everything up and causing this reaction to happen. I think Scully's explanation there feels like the closest thing to what is happening that we have.
Yeah, that's fair.
And it's rare that we can say that the Scully science answer is the correct one.
Well, I think it's one of those ones where she's normally proved right, I think, in terms of how science has done something. She's suffered very few things that don't correspond to some known science eventually. I think she's not so much interested in the origin of things. Like Colony Endgame, the retrovirus. She's really not concerned where it came from, just about curing it. and how to deal with it.
But again, Scully is for the victims, and
Oh, yeah.
you don't need to know where something comes from to understand how to make it go away.
Possibly you should also be a bit intrigued about where this thing that no one's encountered before has come from. You might need to know about it.
I feel from a preventative measure in the fact that they've said that the Norwegian fishermen won't use this area because they fear the vengeful god, which might be this meteorite, that if you can prove what it is and remove it, then it's safe to fish there again.
Yeah. So some more investigation would be good, but we're not going to do that. So I just noted in my notes the other stupid thing about the Philadelphia experiment.
Go on.
No idea if this is even remotely true or everything, but Mulder's very big on it. So they have, okay, so the Philadelphia experiment didn't work. The scientists were then sent to Roswell. Okay, so, oh, for God's sake. Do we have to drag that in as well?
It kind of contradicts things we know already, because we know that what was at Roswell was taken away and split between several of the military bases as well.
Well, that's what Mulder believes. We know he has that improbable photograph of the crash before it crashed.
It's what Mulder believes, but he's just contradicted that with what he said.
Yeah, well, I don't think this will be the last time the X-Files is going to give us one version of events and then say, oh wait, actually it could be these scientists who do time portals that are causing UFO activity. And that spaceship that you had your memory wiped of, but Scully saw before you had your memory wiped.
Yeah, that's exactly what was at Fort Ellen or whatever it was called right at the start of season 1.
Yeah, we remember the black triangle that you had the photo of, and then we saw the second photo of.
And Mulder possibly doesn't remember that. He has his memory wiped.
So Scully could say, yes, Mulder, we did watch those lights dancing possibly in the sky. They could have been lasers, but I don't think they were.
Especially based on evidence we've had since then.
Yeah. I haven't seen a triangle ship for a while, actually.
No, you've had the circular one for a while, I think.
It's not actually clear what ship the bounty hunter ship was it?
You're riding on a Vauxhall transporter all this time.
I don't know, it looked like it crashed. I'm still not over the whole, it looks like it crashes when it lands.
This could be another feature of the Volkswagen transporter ship, to be fair.
They're really bad at this, then. Oh, no, hang on. If it was a Vauxhall transporter ship, then when in Conduit, sorry, we're going to rag on Howard Gordon and Alex Gans's other episode, so if it was the same group of aliens, then surely they could set down somewhere away from the campsite, shapeshift into her mother, walk up to the door, or Stevie, the brother, knock on the door, or even, no, she was sleeping outside, wasn't she?
I think the second that thing touches down, it's going to incinerate everything around it based on the fact it burns the entire tree line hovering.
They can put it away, though. But it's still one of these, the alien erection thing of this group of people, because we're going to have to assume these ones aren't the ones who took Samantha, because otherwise you'd shapeshift into her mother and say, come on, dearie, we're going to go next door. And whoosh. The shapeshifting is really underused. Surely it'd be great for the alien abduction program.
Again, they inferred that the bounty hunter has unusual powers, though. We don't know that's not the shapeshifting.
That's true.
It might not be that they can all do this.
You realise that this Død Kalm is so boring we start talking about other episodes.
I know.
It's
The annoyance of Død Kalm is it doesn't make me especially angry like some of them do. It's just boring.
Yes, it's just, there's absolutely nothing of interest in it.
And some nice conversations between Mulder and Scully aside can't save it.
Yeah, and the philosophical stuff about Ragnarok and the end of the world.
Oh yes, let's talk about that, is how out of place this kind of... It's in Scully's final hour after Mulder has lost consciousness and is presumably about to die. Scully goes through the captain's bag, finds a children's book about Ragnarok, the Norse end of the world.
Well, she assumes it's about Ragnarok.
Because presumably it's in Norwegian.
Yeah.
Yet she still manages to summarise Ragnarok miraculously, despite not being able to read it, down to naming the characters correctly. And kind of mentions the whole, everything will end kind of in silence after a wolf swallows the sun, and I can hear the wolves at the door, which it then becomes, as she loses consciousness, the kind of rescue crew banging on the outside of the ship.
Yeah.
It's just surreal. It's one of the really things that jar me about this episode is I don't understand who thought this kind of monologue was a good idea.
Well, I can point to two of them. They're kind of executive producers, unfortunately.
But why? It's just so hammy and out there.
I can only imagine that basically there was something in the writer's room where it said, right, we've got the ship 3 weeks. We need it. We've got to hire it for 3 weeks. We need 2 weeks to do Colony Endgame. We need a script for the third week. And Howard Gordon just said, I can do it. And they let him off with it. And it's basically a case of, you should have said no. And
or at least we needed more time for like rewrites and kind of just fixing problems with this.
Yeah, I think it could be a problem of power as well, given he is on the executive producer list as well. He's not just a writer. So it's the whole, how much control does anyone have to say no? Because we do know that Howard Gordon and Alex Ganzer will eventually stop writing, and good, because...
They lost to about season 4, I'm afraid.
Yeah, but they are still responsible for, I think, some of the worst episodes so far. Them and Chris Carter, oddly. So Chris Carter has weird spikes where he does really well.
I've got to admit, they are kind of varied. Howard Gordon has really good episodes. You can't just assume that they're going to be kind of bad ones by his name.
That's true. I mean, Fallen Angel was very good.
Yeah, Fallen Angel is an excellent episode. But then you've got ones like this on the other end of the scale.
Conduit as well, to be fair.
Yeah, I don't rate Conduit.
No. Other things that sort of don't feel... I can see what they were going for, but then they don't pan out properly. And there's Scully's disgusting water collection, which is the contents of the snow globe, saline from sardines, which, ooh, that's a bad thing to give to someone who's thirsty.
No, when you're thirsty, you need salts.
Okay.
That's why you get, like, those electrolyte drinks. And
I suppose so. But still, the collection of water, in inverted commas, she puts together, and you just look at the grey stuff and go,
I suppose if the option is death.
Yeah, I know. The option is death. But I think the problem is that the episode goes out such a way of she gathers all this stuff together, and then the outer hull gives way, so it spills on the floor, and no one gets to drink it anyway.
I know that outer hull gives way in the most poetic way possible as well.
Yeah.
Just in that place where Trondheim has kind of locked himself in, thus therefore giving him all the water.
I think his escalation to killer as well is just... Trondheim is a really odd character. We'll talk about Trondheim for a bit, because it's a great bit of... Mulder talks to all these Norwegian fishermen who refuse to go anywhere near the 65th parallel, and then they find the one American in the bar who says, yeah, I'll take you to the 65th parallel that all those people are scared of going to, because he goes almost up to full speed right away, and I will murder. I'll start murdering almost without any kind of provocation, really.
To be fair, Mulder doesn't background check him. You don't know what happened to his previous crew or something.
No, I mean, admittedly, they probably should have done. I mean, I think we still get down to the whole, should you two be on this case in Norway? What the hell?
I'd love to see the debrief with Skinner when they get back.
No, it'd probably be just as boring as the rest of the episode. It'd be one of those horrible FBI meetings.
Where they have to justify that they went to Norway, both nearly died, presumably costing a load of taxpayer money as well because they both nearly died, and then have absolutely no evidence to show from it or kind of explanation for what happened there.
Yeah. Good going, Mulder. Do you have anything else for this sterling episode, or should we move swiftly on to something else?
No, I think you've pretty much covered everything I wrote down about this.
Okay, so we also watched Humbug. Directed by Kim Manners, written by Darin Morgan, his first for the series.
Hooray!
Because he did the story for Blood, but this is the first one he actually wrote. Broadcast on the 31st of March, 1995. Notable guest stars. There's Jim Rose as Dr. Blockhead, who has other television appearances, but is mostly known for the Jim Rose Circus, where he seems to work with the Enigma.
Yes, that's correct.
Who is one of the other guest stars, and it's really quite entertaining to see his name pop up on screen. We're just, Jim Rose, the Enigma, and Michael Anderson, who would be our other one, who plays Mr. Nutt. Best known for Twin Peaks and Fire Walk With Me, where he is the man from another place.
The guy who famously does the backwards talking.
Yep. And may or may not be Mike's arm.
Spoilers.
It's an old series at this point.
Spoilers for a 30-year-old series.
He's been in many other things. He's obviously in Star Trek, in Deep Space Nine, where he played Rumpelstiltskin. Because of course he did. Okay, so there's also Vincent Schiavelli, who played Lanny, who was in One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest as Bruce Fredrickson. He's in The Adventures of Buckaroo Banzai Across the Eighth Dimension as John O'Connor.
Of course you had to find that one.
When you find Buckaroo Banzai in someone's filmography, you've got to sort of pay attention to it. Jeff Goldblum was in that film.
He was, yep.
He was great in that film. I mean, admittedly, it's almost unwatchable.
Yep.
And it was always made me the funniest bit in Ready Player One. Buckaroo Banzai, that's my favourite film. No, it's not. No one has ever said that in their life. We're going to get angry Buckaroo Banzai fans now.
Are there any?
Okay, anyway. He was in Amadeus as Salieri's valet. He's in Batman Returns as the organ grinder. Tomorrow Never Dies as Dr. Kaufman, was my favourite moment from that film. This is I Could Shoot You from Stuttgart and still got the right effect.
Oh, of course, he's him.
Yeah. He was, of course, in Star Trek Next Generation. And he was in 2 episodes of Buffy as Enyos.
Okay.
I can't remember who that is. And lastly, Wayne Grace as Sheriff James Hamilton. He's in Frasier.
Yay.
He's in Baldur's Gate 2 and both Dark Alliance games.
Okay.
He's done a load of Star Wars voices. He was in Seinfeld and Star Trek Next Generation.
I thought he looked familiar.
Would you like to give us a synopsis of Humbug?
Sure. Humbug is set in Gibsonton, Florida, which is a place where sideshow performers tend to vacation and live on their off-seasons. Our episode opens on 2 little boys playing outside in their home swimming pool at night. We follow a mysterious figure stalking them from the woods, who jumps into the pool with them without them noticing, but only to emerge and reveal to be their father, who is a sideshow alligator man. He has ichthyosis, a kind of skin condition that makes him look scaly. He scares the kids for fun, but then tells them to go to bed, but as the children leave, the alligator man, whose name is Jerry, is attacked himself within the pool by something that takes a large bite out of his side and leaves him to bleed to death. Mulder and Scully come onto this case. It turns out to be the last in a 28-year spanning series of attacks, all caused by some unknown assailant with the same MO. They go to the alligator man's funeral and meet a lot of people there who are all sideshow performers, who may be considered freaks to some, but in this town they are the normals, and people like Mulder and Scully are instead viewed as being somewhat freakish. They also are introduced to 2 self-made freaks. There is a human blockhead called Dr. Blockhead, who is a man who is unable to feel pain and does so by doing a lot of horrendous body modification feats. There is also a geek called the Conundrum. Geeks are performers who eat odd things and do things like bite the heads off live animals. Mulder and Scully stay at a trailer park, meeting the kind of distrustful and rather sarcastic owner who is Mr. Nutt, as well as Lanny, an alcoholic with an undeveloped conjoined twin named Leonard attached to his side. While eating at a nearby restaurant with the sheriff, Mulder notices a strange drawing on the menu, which appears to be some kind of monkey with a fishtail attached. He immediately likens this to evidence found on the scenes of the attacks that reveals kind of simian footprints. They visit the man who made this drawing, a local artist and funhouse maker called Hepcat Helm, who explains that the drawing is of the Fiji Mermaid, which is a legendary sideshow act created by Barnum, which famously made even more money for him when it was revealed to be a fake, because people turned up just to make sure it actually was fake. Later that night, Hepcat Helm himself is also attacked and killed by the unseen creature. Following this death, Mulder and Scully both start to independently investigate what's going on. Scully's search in particular takes her to a museum where she falls prey to a Barnum trick, put in a room where there is reportedly evidence for her to see that will help with the case that turns out to be an empty chest, which she is charged extra for seeing. Mulder, on the other hand, comes to learn that the local sheriff was also once a performer. Famously, he was Jim Jim the Dog-Faced Boy, a performer with a excessive body hair that made him look werewolf-like. Mulder begins to wonder from this if Jim Jim is actually a werewolf. They stalk him in the night where they find him burying something under the full moon, which turns out to be a potato that he was using to cure warts on his hand. The sheriff then sympathises with them because evidently their investigation of this is not going terribly well. At the same time, Mr. Nutt is fatally attacked by the creature. When the body is found, Mulder and Scully discover it's holding a pin with a skull on the top quite distinctly. We previously saw in the episode that this was attached to a rent check from Dr. Blockhead. Immediately, Dr. Blockhead has now become the number 1 suspect in this case and is taken into custody, along with Lanny, who is found drunk at the scene, being the one to find Mr. Nutt's body and is distressed by this, so has been put in the drunk tank, just to kind of calm down. While Dr. Blockhead is being interviewed, Scully checks in on Lanny and discovers that his twin Leonard is missing. When Scully investigates what's happened in Lanny's cell, she sees that he is not fatally injured like the other people are, although he does have a wound in his side that is not bleeding. It's just the fact that Leonard can actually detach himself and is a sentient being in his own right. Leonard has realised that Lanny is dying. His alcoholism has basically destroyed his liver. And Leonard, not quite understanding how this works, has been biting onto other people because he's trying to find a new host body. Mulder and Scully try to capture Leonard. They chase him through a funhouse, but ultimately lose him. On leaving the funhouse, they find the conundrum lying on the ground, rubbing his stomach, uninjured but apparently having been attacked. The following morning, the investigation into Leonard's whereabouts continues, and we discover that Lanny has died in the night, so hypothetically Leonard cannot now survive very long away from a host. As Mulder notes that Dr. Blockhead is preparing to leave town with the conundrum, he makes a comment to Scully about how modern science is eradicating genetic anomalies, so very soon people like him and the other freaks will not exist anymore and everyone will just look like Mulder. The conundrum still looks unwell, and as they are leaving, Mulder asks him what the matter. The conundrum replies, speaking for the first and only time in the episode, by replying, "It's probably something I ate," inferring Leonard's unfortunate fate. Dr. Blockhead drives away with the conundrum as Mulder and Scully kind of turn to each other, looking shocked and somewhat confused.
Thank you.
I feel like I haven't done it service there. This is a really, really good episode.
It's kind of starting from the end, but this puts me in mind of read through all the Onion. The Onion went episode by episode to the X-Files at one point. There's a whole series of just little articles about each and every episode. And particularly anything written by Darin Morgan is always very fascinating to read their views of it. And I can't remember which one it's in. It might be Jose Chung, so a bit later on. But the writer of the article was making a point of Darin Morgan absolutely hates Mulder, unreservedly, and he loves Scully. Because every episode, except for one later on, is tilted so that Mulder comes off looking really bad. And this episode is no exception, because Dr. Blockhead's spiel is a fantastic send-up of Mulder's entire persona.
Yeah. Hiram Nutt does it earlier in the episode as well, where he gets offended that Mulder has typed him as, because he's diminutive, as being a kind of performer, when he has a degree in hotel management. But at the same time, he does the same thing to Mulder and comes to the conclusion that Mulder is an FBI agent.
Much to Mulder's chagrin to say, but I am an FBI agent. No, this is it's a very good episode. It's very, very funny. I do remember the first time, and I think this is one of the reasons why the episode works well, is you're not sure when to start laughing. The first time you experience Humbug, it's not clear that it's a comedy, and part of why it works so well is because D-handed Devlet's accepting, and Mulder's occasional wisecracks beside, the X-Files have been unrelentingly dour and serious, and now we have the most absurd episode they could possibly throw in.
It's interesting, at the time this was made, apparently a lot of the other crew members didn't like the tone of this episode because they felt it made fun of the X-Files, which it does spectacularly. Yeah. But the series to date has been largely very serious, and this is the first outright comedy. But it's because Darin Morgan's past is basically as a comedic writer, and he said himself that he was trying to see how much humour he could slip into it. And as a result, Kim Manners has actually apparently cut out a number of scenes from this that he thought was too comedic because it went too far. From which point, I'd recommend reading the young adult novel adaptation from this. It's another one by Les Martin and is also called Humbug. But there are a lot of scenes in that one that do not appear in the final episode, and some of them are incredibly funny.
And we can pretty safely say that Kim Manners will come round on this later on, given he's going to direct a few more of these. And they're going to just get it funnier from here, really. Yeah,
the episode was an absolute success at the time it was made, which I guess has kind of proved Kim Manners and others wrong, and they must have taken this on board going forward, that people... It's when it's not all the time, it's fine to have the odd episode that just pokes fun at everything.
It's only so good because you've had a season and a half or so of build-up to start lampooning itself.
Yeah. Well, for the sake of this one, it's kind of interesting when you take on board the concept of the other. So we've seen the other as it normally appears in kind of horror in particular throughout every other episode in this season, where anything that is different is bad, basically. So you've got your Tombs, is a monster, is different, he's a mutant, he's bad. The host is different, he's a monster, he's bad. in this episode, we're in a town full of sideshow performers, so they are the norm, and Mulder and Scully represent the other. So you've immediately got this incredible thing that throws the X-Files pattern on its head.
Exactly. And the host, of course, actually managed to make a cameo in the background, if you watch very closely.
He's in Hepcat Helm's little workshop.
Yeah. Hepcat Helm, who has apparently one record he plays on repeat.
I quite
Get some more
liked
music,
him.
man. Oh, it's very funny, but it's a case of, it's the same song both times.
You kind of touched on it at the start, but I feel Dr. Blockhead and the Enigma are what steal the show in this episode. Blockhead in particular, because he's so verbose.
He's very charismatic, and it's sort of the reveal that he actually just run these kind of circuses is not a surprise at all. He's got that kind of personality. There is also kind of a shock he hasn't got more sort of film and TV work, just because he feels very natural in this. I mean, he's not a bad actor at all. He's completely dedicated to it, isn't he?
Yeah, and every scene he's in, he's just magnetic. Your eyes are on him all the times, and the weird things he's doing and what he's thrusting up his nose in this particular moment.
Yep. And disrupting a funeral.
Doing a straitjacket escape while suspended from his ankles above a pot of boiling water.
Although it turns out it's not boiling water because the Enigma's in there.
That doesn't disprove that it's not boiling water.
I think the conundrum. I think the conundrum does have some normal human limits despite all his other weirdness.
There is a line in the novel, which I don't think makes it into the episode, where Scully glances at the pot but doesn't touch it, and says, there must be a kind of filter in there, and he's at the bottom with a scuba tank, and Mulder goes, yeah, perhaps.
But thinking about your point about the other, I think the funeral actually really clearly illustrates it, just because they come and join in with the rest of the congregation, which is full up of all the sideshow performers. We've got the priest who has no arms, who's turning pages with his feet, and then Dr. Blockhead does his stunt, and everyone just clears out from the chairs and just leaves the two FBI agents sitting there and on their own in this graveyard.
It's a really neat way to do this concept, where you really quickly become to accept the fact that even though the kind of performer characters, and the ones who aren't, like Mr. Nutt, look different, they are more down to earth. And I think the sheriff says at one point the fact that other people have a harder time with how they look than they do themselves. Because, living here, particularly in Gibsonton, where everybody is a performer, this is the norm.
Yeah, and the constant assumptions about people. Like, later on where Mulder finds Mr. Nutt under Scully's trailer, and he's sort of insinuating some untoward stuff, and then Scully just really says, has he finished fixing the water yet?
I like, there's a bit later in the episode as well, which is an unusual bit of kind of cheesecake shot for Scully as well, when Lanny knocks on her door and she comes to it and both of their robes are open. And you have this uncomfortable moment where Lanny's kind of looking at her cleavage and Scully is doing the same thing, eyeing up Leonard. Yeah. And then they both quickly cover themselves over. It's a really nice shot, just little split-second moment.
Of all the weird moments in the episode, the most unbelievable is Mulder not knowing what the Fiji mermaid is, because that feels so out of character for him, to not have any knowledge of Barnum and everything.
Yeah, I guess it doesn't really fall under Mulder's kind of umbrella of mainly being into conspiracies and stuff.
But it's a cryptid thing though, so it's one of the things you'd think would come in.
It's not a cryptid though, because it's a gaff.
It's a gaff, but it's still it's one of those asides you get when you talk about cryptids. Say it's not a Fiji mermaid kind of thing.
It's one of the most famous gaffs of all time, and you're surprised that a lot of adults wouldn't have heard of it, to be honest, particularly in America.
Yeah, so but Scully, I understand not knowing about it. Mulder, on the other hand, I don't think there's any way you can't have come across this tangentially somewhere.
Even if you didn't know its name, I would have thought you'd recognise it, because it's very distinct.
I think it's one of these it's got to play to the audience, because there's, as you said, there's a chance the audience doesn't know what this is.
Mm.
But it's odd that Mulder doesn't explain it. Presumably it's just set up Hepcat to be killed, but...
Yeah, I'm pretty sure alone that I've seen a Fiji mermaid at Ripley's Believe It or Not museum, so it's not one of these things that are archaic and people might not have encountered.
Exactly. There was a line from Dr. Blockhead, which I feel is kind of almost echoed many years later in Arrested Development. Dr. Blockhead doesn't do tricks. They're not illusions either, so...
No.
They're performances, but... Can't help but think of...
Yeah, very Job-esque. Mind you, he is very Job-esque, being a performer.
He's more competent than Job, though.
I think most people are more competent than Job.
That's true.
You do have an interesting idea in this episode. The kind of concept that's carried throughout is the idea of what is humbug. in the fact that it's an episode that causes you to kind of evaluate what is true and what is false. In a town full of people many of whom have secrets, many are performers, some of them are what they consider genuine freaks in this, and some of them are self-made. It kind of all encapsulates quite nicely in the scene with Scully in the museum when she learns the difference between kind of freaks and performers and gaffes and things like that. A gaff being something that isn't kind of freakish in any way, it's been faked, like the Fiji mermaid, and it gives an example of a pair of co-joined twins in a picture she looks at, who can't possibly be real co-joined twins because they're not identical.
Yeah, interesting definition there.
Which also kind of leads on to our biggest clue for the episode, which is Scully finding out the story of Chang and Eng.
Yeah.
Which is a very, very famous story about a pair of high-profile co-joined twins. The story going that one of them died of a cranial hemorrhage in his sleep, and the other one died a few hours later of fright. Which is our first big clue about Lanny and Leonard at the end of the episode, where it turns out a similar idea is that Leonard knows that Lanny is dying, and Leonard does not want this.
Yes.
So it's unclear how intelligent Leonard is in the episode, but Lanny at least believes that he genuinely doesn't think he's hurting people, he just thinks that this is the way he will find a new host. A new brother, specifically.
Yeah, and a lot of complicated, deep sadness with all that, despite the humorous tone elsewhere.
Yeah. You never really see him clearly as well, but the Leonard puppet is quite impressive.
Yeah, I think it's a good idea to keep it sort of off-screen as much as possible.
You see its face and you see what's probably largely a CGI one moving kind of distantly a few times.
Yeah. They chase it around, and I have to quote this directly, the Tabernacle of Terror, not a fun house.
It's specifically a Tabernacle of Terror.
I do like the insistence on referring to it by the correct name. I think the sheriff actually is a great guest star, really. Because I love the whole little scene where they've decided that Jim, the dog-faced boy, is definitely their suspect. They're going to stake him out and watch him burying the potatoes. And it puts me a bit in mind of the Burbs, where he sort of sees the Klopax doing all the weird sinister stuff during the night. And I think it's taking on that kind of vibe for the X-Files, but with the explanation being utterly mundane in the end.
Like Rear Window as well. You've got that kind of idea of seeing something distantly and assuming it's something sinister.
But then you don't normally quite get the thing of, well, we're just uncovering your potato.
It's the matter-of-fact way the sheriff explains that it's a cure for warts as well. Like it's something everyone should know.
But it's also the put-down, isn't it? I take it the investigation not doing too well, is it?
I like the response when they present him with the evidence that he's Jim as well, because it's no secret to anyone but the FBI agents.
Yeah, he just admits it, yeah. What happened? I got a bald spot. Well, yeah, of course.
Even on seeing the picture, he just says something like, boy, wasn't I thin back then? Because, again, there's no shame.
No.
No one in this episode is ashamed of who they are or were, which is really nice, to be fair. Not to focus on the liver-eating mutant or something like that.
No, it said we've got the fish-eating guy. The Enigma conundrum. It's one of those whole, wow, not sure how you could do that.
Geeks are a thing. I saw one perform at university once.
It's just one of those whole, the mindset of doing it is kind of the... Ugh.
Yeah, the guy I watched when I was at university was doing things like swallowing light bulbs and things, and it's how you even discover you have this talent, I suppose.
Like with many things like that. There is an interesting throwaway line towards the end of the episode when they've come to the conclusion Dr. Blockhead is the one responsible, which always feels like they have to have a suspect, because I don't think as an audience member you ever think it is him. Because, I mean, you do get glimpses of Leonard throughout the episode, but it's not persuasively is Dr. Blockhead a suspect to you, the audience.
Yeah, I guess you never consider Leonard because you wouldn't think that possible.
No.
In your head, again, it's the whole humbug of the whole thing.
Yeah. But it's a whole... You don't think Dr. Blockhead is a suspect. And I think it's part of... I'm guessing it could be some commentary on how the FBI operates, and the fact that they're not even bothering to give a justification for why Dr. Blockhead would want to kill anyone.
Your only clue is that Mr. Nutt was holding that pin.
Yeah, and it's a case of that's really flimsy circumstantial evidence, guys. But they never get into motive, ever. So they never actually try to... Because we find out what Leonard's motive is, but they never try to assign one to Dr. Blockhead.
I guess they never really get to that point. They're still questioning him at the point where they find Lanny sans
Yeah.
Leonard.
But I like the comedy moments of even arresting him, like knocking Mulder onto a bed of nails, or the fact he's stringing himself up with the suspension stuff, and the sheriff catches him with that when he's trying to flee.
Oh, you see him. He's preparing to kind of recreate a Sundance or something like
And
that.
the sheriff has grabbed him by all the different points. It's wincing of ooh.
He even just says "ow," just so mundane as they took him.
Again, it's sort of he's a really good guest star, and it's kind of a shame he's just one-off guest character, really.
It's really a shame for most of the ones in this episode. Even the ones that pass away, like Mr. Nutt, are just so full of character.
And Lanny's story about how being a part of a freak show was demeaning, so he has a whole new job to feel proud of, which is carrying luggage. And
Which,
it's
after Mr. Nutt has convinced him of this as well.
It's a matter of factness of which how he sort of says it as well. A job that gives me so much more respect, despite the fact that your alcoholism might be as a result of this. We're not sure.
It's Lanny is the closest thing we ultimately have to a villain in the episode, and you still feel sorry for him.
Yeah, well, he does explain it. It's a case of how could I possibly turn him in without turning myself in?
But at the same time, Lanny must be aware that Leonard has killed 28 people. No, it was 28 years. I can't remember how many people that Leonard has killed over this time.
He makes clear that he's very much aware, but it's a case of what can he do?
Turn yourself in because your co-joined twin's murdering people.
Sort of submit himself to jail for a crime he didn't commit.
Not necessarily. He'd just have to give up on his brother because you don't know that Lanny can't survive without Leonard.
It's true, though I think it's the timing makes it clear that they do need to depend on each other.
No, I feel it makes clear that Leonard needs to depend on him. You don't know how much Lanny does.
That's true, though I think the dying of cirrhosis of the liver is a bit... I think the implication is there that it's because Leonard was killed.
I don't think it was. Scully specifically says he died of cirrhosis of the liver. That's not going to be caused by Lanny. That's caused by his alcoholism.
True, but I just the timing, I thought.
I think it was just poetic timing is how I read it, is that, Lanny's been dying for some time and this is the night.
It could be.
Because it's clear that this must have been long going because Leonard's been trying to get away from him for 28 years. And, on that basis of how could I turn him in without turning myself in, is Leonard'll throw you under the bus and abandon you in a heartbeat, apparently.
Well, you get into some complicated sibling stuff there, really.
Or it's, again, how intelligent Leonard actually is you don't know it's just not some kind of animal survival instinct. He doesn't show any sign of actually being truly sapient at any point.
No. Very few X-Files episodes, I think, end with one character eating the monster. That's got to be a first for us.
Yeah. Nothing like all the evidence having been eaten by Conundrum. It's a lovely dark sting for the end of the episode, though.
It's how pleased he looks with himself, which is kind of really disturbing.
It's also the fact that you've assumed that the Conundrum is unintelligent to that point as well, because it's the only time he speaks or kind of shows any level of intelligence, really. The Conundrum is aware of what he did.
Just to sort of throw all your assumptions into the mix.
Again, that's kind of how Barnum works. There's one of them born every minute and all that stuff. Which is Mulder in this episode, mainly.
Well, even Scully manages to fool him with the cricket.
Mind you, Scully is also fooled in the museum by the Great Unknown.
Yeah, but do you want to comment on the cricket trick and how implausible everything is in that little moment?
Yeah, you're probably already aware of most of my menagerie, but I also keep toads, who like to eat crickets. And crickets are the worst creatures in the world ever. And really, I have no empathy for them. Because crickets are fast, they can jump, and they bite. So Scully's disappearing trick is that must have been the most docile and well-behaved cricket, not to kind of disappear over her shoulder, bite her, just slip between her fingers while she's pulling this amazing sleight of hand, is Scully has skills.
Apparently so. Which I think is the first and only time we've heard that she has any kind of stage magic in her background.
Yeah, it probably would have been easier just to eat the cricket, to be honest.
Yeah, but people have limits. I mean, I know you've eaten crickets, but only the chocolate-covered ones.
They were salt and vinegar, I will have you know.
Salt and vinegar,
the crickets
yes.
I tried. They're crunchy. They're not bad.
Do you have anything else for this episode?
No, I think we've covered all the very special people, as they're called, throughout this episode.
Yes. Again, it's an episode that works mostly because the X-Files hasn't been funny up until this point.
As an experiment, though, it's worked really well. It's such a fun episode. It's probably been one of my favourite ones so far, but as you said, it wouldn't have worked if you'd had it earlier than this point, I don't think.
No, we need the baseline of the X-Files is deadly serious. Mulder can do some wisecrack jokes and some funny moments, but there's nothing on the level of an outright comedy episode.
Yeah, the closest I think we've had is kind of like any bit with Frohickey of the Lone Gunman or something. These bits that are slightly upbeat but aren't inherently funny.
Well, D-Han, D-Valette is probably the other one where it's so over the top serious at times.
But it's still very dark.
It is, well, I was going to say, black comedy is a thing, so I think it's... You could probably try and claim it's a very black comedy. I don't think it's meant... I don't know if we're meant to find it as funny as we did the last time.
Yeah, you've probably got an argument there.
Yeah, I remember it being a lot more serious the first time I watched it, but this last time it's very hard to take any of it seriously. So that could be a change in mindset.
Some of it's down to taste, though. I know there are episodes to come that some people find funny and other people say are really scary. So in part, it's what kind of makes you afraid, I guess.
So next week it is Kalashara and Ephemaculata, I think?
Correct, yep.
So if you want to get hold of us, our email address is thingsaregettingstrange42@gmail.com.
Alternatively, you can come and talk to me over on our social media. Please do so if there's anything you'd like me to promote at the start of our podcasts, like we've been doing for FarFest so far. So conventions, contests, any neat bits of art you've got on the go. You can find me on Twitter at @GetStrange42. Tumblr is the same, GetStrange42. I'm on Mastodon at GetStrange42 at universedon.com. And I'm also on Facebook. You can find me just by searching for Things Are Getting Strange and X-Files Rewatch Podcast.
Thank you. Our theme music is Envision by Kevin MacLeod. You can find that in Compotech.com and licensed under the Creative Commons by Attribution 3.0. Thank you all for listening, and until next week, remember,
the truth is out there.